It will be difficult, to be frank, to compete on the price level with the Chinese cars. And then we have additional issues like a high level of bureaucracy. And the question is, how can we make the transition and quick? We are not in a good shape at the moment.
Companies in Germany are slashing jobs, from car makers like Volkswagen and Ford to steelmaker Thyssenkrupp. Thousands of jobs are on the line. So what does this say about the state of Germany and its future? Well, joining me now is Labour economist Nicholas Ziebart from the Leibniz Centre for European Economic Research. Thank you very much for joining us. What do these proposed job cuts tell us about the state of German industry?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. Well, the state of the German industry is not good. I mean, actually, it's really bad. The mood is down. People are concerned, especially, blue-collar workers who have had pretty good incomes, pretty good jobs, are afraid about the future. They may lose their jobs. We are not in a good shape at the moment.
Okay, so what's going on here? I mean, why are we seeing the relative decline in industrial production in Germany? Is that what we're facing right now?
Yeah, we probably see now that Germany have had probably for a long time, probably 2 decades or so, some underlying issues that didn't come to light fully. So first of all, we were totally dependent on Russian gas, and politicians kind of gambled that it would just continue like this. And there was a big trust in Russia and in Putin, also because of our history. And then all of a sudden, after the war started, politicians realized, okay, we are in a new world. Our chancellor created a new term, Zeitenwende, for that special situation. And we're still struggling to find our way to understand where have we been, where will we go, what's the new business model for Germany, and how can we be successful. So, for example, some economists, some Greens suggest we need to make a transition to a green society, essentially, green jobs. That's the dream. The question is it realistic, and how fast can we transition to that energy, renewable, fully CO2 neutral economy? And that's totally unclear.
Okay, but we've heard for a long while that Germany doesn't have enough workers, and here we have companies essentially saying that they have too many.
It's true. We have still a shortage and a lack of qualified workers, but in other sectors. So we have a big shortage in the education sector, in the childcare sector, but also in the healthcare sector. But those are different jobs than the jobs that we are losing now, which are like in the US, in the Rust Belt states a couple of decades ago, well-paid blue-collar jobs. And those are also different people, differently educated people, and it's very hard to retrain them.
Okay, so do you see the trend moving towards an eventual dead end for industry, certainly the big companies in Germany? So slashing more jobs, slimming down manufacturing, and that the German economy just has to focus on other sectors for economic growth. You mentioned green industry as one potential outlet. How do you see that?
Yeah, these are all great questions. We probably have to do that to save these, like at least the core of some of these old industries like steel and automobile. Companies have to become slimmer, more efficient, but also manage the transition to new products and products that consumers like, right? We have China producing electric vehicles. It's a big competition. CEOs of those companies probably have waited for too long, haven't moved fast enough. Now they're too expensive. So there are underlying structural issues in those industries. There is a chance, I believe, that we can, we can keep those industries, but certainly not to the extent we've seen for the past decades. And then the question is, where do we find new jobs? How can we grow new jobs? And the green industries are certainly an opportunity, but also here the question is, how can we maintain a level of cheap energy prices? They are way higher than in other economies. But the problem is that we decided to phase out of nuclear energy. We don't want to burn coal. And the renewables are on a good way to, maybe energy independence, but it's very hard to get there with just renewable energy. And so we are stuck somewhere in the middle. And then we have additional issues like a high level of bureaucracy. So we have the state level, we have the federal level, and then we have the European Union. And companies across the board complain that they spend way too much time on paperwork and bureaucratic stuff. In addition, we are not fast enough with digitalization of the economy. So processes are less efficient than in other countries, which means that our productivity levels have stagnated, basically. So we need to become more productive per worker per hour. And the question is, how can we make the transition and quick? And the third problem is that we have a relatively high level of tax and social contribution rates. So the German government, we have a generous, nice welfare state. The problem is that most employees, they get taxed 50% or even more of their income away when you count income taxes and social contribution rates. So people are quite unhappy about that. But that's reality. And then the incentives to take up work or to work longer hours are not there.
So, I spoke to the head of one industry association, VDMA, earlier this year, and he touched on this point as well, and was basically saying that German workers need to forget retiring early. They need to work a full week, maybe longer hours, forget the four-day working week. Are you now also saying we need to essentially scrap what we know as the current German car industry because it just isn't viable?
We will have to see that. I still have hope that the German car industry can survive and that we will not see the deaths of German automakers, right? But probably we will have jobs and we need a transition period to make these car companies competitive again on an international level and make the transition to electric vehicles. So that will take some time, and that's a decision that's rooted within the companies. And also we have strong unions in Germany, so unions have to really work together now with the leaders of these companies to make it work. So we will have to see if that will be a success story or not.
Right,
Yes.
well, I just want to touch on those e-cars. China is building cheaper substitutes, and the cheaper aspect, they're also decent quality and they're cheap, and that's where the demand lies in the mass market, is cheaper products. So I don't think that Germany can compete, right? So even if German car makers make the switch to e-cars, there's just not necessarily the demand there for the German cars, which are more expensive, built with more expensive labor, in factories which have higher energy costs, than the cheaper ones that they can get from China.
I would say that's a pretty good analysis. It will be difficult, to be frank, to compete on the price level with the Chinese cars, right? China is a big market, and it seems like Chinese consumers prefer their own Chinese-made electric vehicles over the German ones. And in previous decades, they loved German cars. It was the old school cars and not the new ones. So now we have to see if automakers are trying to develop cheaper cars for people who want to buy German-made electric vehicles but can't afford the expensive ones. So I think there is a pathway potentially, but it won't be easy. And then the chance for German automakers is probably the focus on luxury, high-end electric vehicles.
Okay, I want to bring us back to this point, though, about pensions, working hours, and this kind of thing. The threat of job cuts like these weakens workers' bargaining power. So is it likely for those who don't get their jobs cut, those left behind, that they could face stagnating wages and working conditions?
I do believe that we'll enter a phase of stagnating wages, unfortunately, especially if we don't find ways to increase our productivity, right? So productivity growth is here the key, which means we need to increase productivity per worker per hour to be able to raise wages. That's as simple as that. And for that, we need to become more efficient. We need to digitalization in the economy, in the different sectors. And we also need a better infrastructure. The German infrastructure is falling apart. So we have not invested in that sector for decades. And that's comes and hurts us now.
Okay, so let's talk about transferring skills. What do the workers that get fired in these industrial companies do? What are their prospects for retraining and getting hired again at a similar level in another company?
Retraining blue-collar workers who produce cars is a difficult undertaking, I would argue. I mean, it depends a little bit what age we are talking about, right? It's easier to retrain a young worker than an older worker. It also depends on the specific job, if you're on the assembly line, right? Or if you're more like a software engineer. So it's hard to, have a one-size-fits-all response here. The good news is also that we haven't seen massive layoffs, but the threat is that we will lose jobs over time, and these workers need to be reintegrated into the labor market. We also need to see in what health condition they are, if they are mobile geographically. So historically in Germany, our geographic mobility is quite low, so people don't really move to find new jobs. So we need to think about that in addition to retraining workers.
Okay, I want to kind of go on a slightly different course here and talk about the trade deal between the EU and Mercosur, which was signed on Friday. So businesses praise the opportunities of such trade deals, but what impact do they have on workers, looking at it from the kind of German or European perspective that we have right now?
So generally, as an economist, I'm all for trade deals, I have to say. Like in our textbook examples, Econ 101, we learned that trade deals make everybody better off. And I still believe that on average, that's true. So we should have friends around the world. We should have trading partners. We should not engage in some trade wars like the Trump administration will hopefully or hopefully not do in the future. So we need trade deals. It's really important to have trade deals. However, for specific groups of industries or specific workers, it may mean that they will lose their jobs because, and we've seen that when the big China shock hit maybe 20 years ago in the United States, for example. And we saw back then a lot of outsourcing, a lot of shipping of good old blue-collar worker jobs, well-paid jobs from the United States to Asia. And those jobs have not come back. And that led to a lot of frustration in the Rust Belt states and eventually also to probably the polarization that we have now. And that is a risk that we have to face, certainly.
Okay. Well, usually what I like to do is to end on a positive, on a high note. Are there any reasons to be optimistic with all the difficulties that workers are facing right now, with all of the potential threats to their jobs? We're talking specifically mostly in industry here. What are the reasons to be optimistic, would you say?
So there are also some silver linings, right? I mean, Germany is still a very powerful, strong economy. We have a really good base. We have a highly qualified workforce. We still have a relatively efficient administration compared to other countries. We do have some bureaucracy, but corruption levels are low. It's a slow administration in Germany, but it does work. And we also know that Germany can reinvent itself. We've had a similar crisis maybe more than 20 years ago when Germany was called the sick man of Europe. We had a much higher unemployment rate at the time, 5 million unemployed people. And then Social Democrats, in fact, and the Greens implemented some structural reforms in the social insurance systems and the welfare state that led to the upswing of about 20 years. And I'm somewhat hopeful that maybe in the next couple of years, we will realize what we need in terms of structural reforms to bring us back in shape and on track and have a situation where we will have more growth and better wages and still can maintain basically our level of social insurance that we have at the moment.
Okay, so difficult times, complicated times, but there are reasons to be cheerful, at least hopeful. Nicholas Ziebart, thank you very much for that.